Welcome to the Pod. I'm here with Kira Hession, licensed mental health counselor. Hi, Kira.
Hi, Bree. How are you?
I'm well. I'm so excited that you came back for another episode and joining us. But for those that have not met you yet, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I work as a licensed mental health counselor. I work with all populations of individuals. And as we had spoke, Domestic Violence Awareness Month is this month in October. So I thought it'd be nice to just offer some tips and some information to be helpful, especially from working in this field of work.
Thank you. I'm very honored to have you here. I think that your perspective is so important, especially with everything that you do. So I would love for you to share with us your perspective from that licensed mental health counseling.
Yeah, sure. So, one of the things I would like to just kind of start with is just what is domestic violence? We talk about the awareness and we talk about, who it affects, but like, what is it actually? So, I'll first start with just a little definition. So, domestic violence is a pattern of intentionally violent and or controlling behavior used against a family member or a dating intimate partner to gain power and control over that person during and or after the relationship. And domestic violence is known as or also known as family violence, intimate partner violence, or dating violence. So it kind of encompasses more than sometimes what some of the rest of our perspectives could be. It could be a family member, it could be an intimate partner. So it has a full range of impact.
Absolutely. I think that's something that we tend to I think forget that it can be a family member, especially. It doesn't just have to be your partner. It could be, your mom, your dad, your brother, whoever, a sister. So I'm glad that you bring that up because that's so important to know that it's not like domestic violence is just strictly you're in a partnership and that's it. It goes beyond that.
Yeah. So that's just one thing I like to start with. And then, when we think about just the basic definition, we also look into, some warning signs or some symptoms we could say that happen because of domestic violence. So a lot of times we'll see in the relationship, be that family or intimate partner, just inequality between people. A lot of times will show a lot of lack of respect or concern for another person. Lack of choice. We can see the victim, not having a lot of choices or not having a voice. Fear or uncertainty comes up a lot. The person feeling on guard or afraid because of the other's unpredictable behavior or language they could use. We might also see suspicion or lack of trust. So the abusive person constantly demanding the other person to prove themselves. So those are some signs that we may see from a person or symptoms because of what's going on in their relationship.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's important to have those. And even if you are listening and need to write that down, you know, so important, it's so important to have those because sometimes you don't recognize the signs or symptoms until either someone else has talked about it or, you're finally coming into that awareness of seeing it and coming out of that fog of, being in the environment.
Yeah.
Um,
Um,
oh,
oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I would love for you to share as well the statistics of domestic violence.
Yeah, sure. So, some statistics out there are on average, nearly 20 people per minute are physically abused by an intimate partner in the United States. So, that equates to more than 10 million women and men. Um, 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men will experience severe intimate partner physical violence or intimate partner sexual violence. It also includes partner stalking, impacts such as injury, fearfulness, PTSD, um, and also contraction of sexually transmitted diseases as well. 1 in 7 women and 1 in 25 men have been injured by an intimate partner. On a typical day, there are more than 20,000 phone calls placed to domestic violence hotlines nationwide. And in a really unhealthy situation, the presence of weapons, such as a gun, in a domestic violent situation increases the risk of homicide by 500%. Um, Intimate partner violence accounts for 15% of all violent crime. Women between the ages of 18 and 24 are most commonly abused by an intimate partner. And also, aside from just the physical portion, the stalking portion that can come along with domestic violence, 19.3 million women and 5.1 million men in the United States have been stalked within their lifetime. 60.8% are female victims, and 43.5 men reported being a victim. So we have a lot of really large statistics, and I think just shines light on the importance of this month being Awareness Month for domestic violence because it is really prevalent in our society.
Yeah, and those numbers are just insane to me, just the amount of abuse that is out there. And I also appreciate that you mentioned men as well, because I do know um, that a lot of people think that it's just women, but men can be abused too, and there probably would be no more numbers, I'm sure. But I don't think that every single, just like with women too, not everyone is, that's like reportable numbers.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, wow. Thank you for sharing that as well.
yeah, no problem. Um, in addition to some of those statistics, we talked about families and if there's children involved. One of the statistics is 1 in 15 children are exposed to intimate partner violence each year. And 90% of them witness the violence occurring within their home. So, you know, I know in your earlier episodes this month, you had talked with a school counselor that was discussing, kind of prevention. And, those kids are definitely in need of assistance and counseling and help just as much as the individuals going through this process.
Absolutely. I don't think many realize how it impacts not just like, especially in a family unit, it impacts the whole family. Um, and I think that we only think, oh, it's just, mom and dad, but, or, whoever in that family unit, um, it affects the children too.
Yeah, it really does affect everyone and extended too, friends and extended family members that maybe are aware of the symptoms occurring in the household and trying to be helpful, but not really sure how to do that, and be able to keep people safe at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm very grateful for you sharing all of this because it's so important with the awareness. I feel that there's so much that I guess there's like so much out there that it's hard to just get it. That's why we had to do this series, right? Because it's hard to get it into one episode. Um, but it's so important that we talk about these things, and even as bystanders that maybe seeing signs or symptoms. I know that a lot of people are afraid to say something, but there's that saying, if you see something, say something is so important.
Yes. Yep. And just being able to, reach out to those people saying, I'm here for you, or is there any way I can be helpful? Just to know that when they decide and when they feel comfortable, that they may want to leave this situation, that they know they have people that will support them and be behind their decision.
Absolutely. I do have a quick question before we continue toward this, but a lot of times I hear um, like moms and dads say, I can't leave because we have a child together.
Yeah.
Um, what, from your perspective, advice would you give someone that says,
Yeah, so I mean, when we talk about domestic violence in general, we really always have to analyze as family members, but especially in a counseling relationship and situation of the safety. Um, a lot of individuals fear the safety of not only themselves, but if they have a child with someone, the safety or how that child's being utilized as a threat, right, against them. So, what I would say to that person, definitely needing to know their whole situation is always best in a counseling situation. Um, but to be able to create a safe plan with a counselor or with a support person, any of the reach out numbers can be of assistance to that. And know your plan for you and your child. Most of the time, we don't make changes because of fear. It's difficult to leave a situation even though it's been unhealthy. It's still a really big change to be on your own, and that connection you've created with a person because of having a child with them can be a big loss, you know. Um, and I'm sure many parents are thinking the impact of not having that other parent in their life, maybe. But the biggest thing is when we just reviewed those statistics, the impact of staying in that relationship with your child. What will that impact them versus being able to leave and have a safe situation? Because they are aware of what's going on in the home, even if, you feel like they don't see it. Most of the time, kids are very aware that mom and dad aren't getting along. There's things going on. And that's how we see in schools, behaviors from kids because there's a lot going on in their life at home. So it's kind of weighing out, if I stay in this situation, how will that impact them? Versus if I leave this situation, how will that impact them? Because we've seen in development from kids that if we have a positive, healthy support system in our life, it doesn't always have to be biological. We can still be very successful adults in the future.
absolutely. Um, yeah, I think that that's super important. And I love that you mentioned the safe plan because I just want to, I know that last or that the week before this, we're going to be talking about a safety plan. But I want to know from your perspective, how important is it to have a safety plan?
Yeah, so I mean, even at the beginning of your question, with if you want to leave and you have a child involved, and even if you don't have a child involved and it's just yourself, a safety plan is extremely important, because we're talking about an unsafe situation, right? And we're trying to get to a safer environment. So creating a safety plan with someone is important, as well as the people that are going to be involved in the safety plan being aware. I do have one safety plan essentially, and I will just briefly review over just kind of some of the steps that are involved, because it's about a 5-page form that you can fill out. So with someone, so I won't go through all the questions, but it really helps bring to light and awareness, roadblocks that might happen during this process, and but also empowers the individual needing to get out of the situation, to trust their intuition and their instinct. They know this situation, know this person the best, compared to any of us on the outside. So it's really awareness building and making sure you have everything set up. So, some of the things that would be reviewed is step one is safety during a violent incident. So, this part actually talks about if there was an unhealthy situation to come up, a fight that would involve any sort of violence, how do you keep yourself safe in that situation? Um, where are the exits in your location? What rooms are the most safe and the least safe? Um, because we're also trying to just live day by day to get to our kind of end plan of leaving, if that's the individual's choice. So we have to keep the person safe in the meantime. The second step is safety when preparing to leave. So that's gathering all your information regarding, you know, if you don't have your cell phone because it gets taken away, for example, do you at least know one person's number that if you can get to a phone, you could call them? And are they aware, if that's your mom, do you know your mom's cell phone number without needing your phone and making her aware that, this call might come through eventually? So that's kind of step two is, preparing to leave, thinking of things that you need to have with you all the time, and making others aware of your situation. Step three is safety in your own residence. So again, we're looking at if once you do leave, how do you make your home safe at that point? Are you leaving the home? Are you staying there and the other person's being removed? Depending on your situation. So you want to look at, are your locks on your doors and windows the same? Do you change them? Um, who you're giving out your address to. Um, you know, if you have children, who's going to be in charge of being allowed to pick them up, from school or at a babysitter, so that the other individual wouldn't be allowed access to get them. So that's kind of planning once you're on your own. There's also safety with an order of protection. A lot of times that's very necessary to take legal matters into your own hands, being able to reach out to the authorities or an attorney, etc., to, put a legal order in place. So then if that person does then violate, you have that other safety measure essentially from, the police or whoever else that would be around you. Then you have thinking about safety on the job. and in public. So once you're out on your own, you know, what safety measures will you be taking when you're getting to work? You know, how do you get to work each day? Is that public transportation your own? Do you walk down a street by yourself? Those type of things. Um, then we have step 6, which is also thinking about safety and substance misuse, because that happens. It's a really co-occurring prevalent issue because, you know, we're trying to cope. So we want to think about, you know, are we using substances? If not, you know, that's obviously a good thing. But also, is that partner that you're no longer with, are they under the influence too? Because that can make a situation higher risk. And then we have safety and emotional health. So uh, being able to plan for who you're going to reach out to when you're having a difficult time. What happens if that person does get in contact with you? You know, how will you deal with that situation? Who will be your person, you know, for support? And then we have at the bottom, it has basically a checklist of items to take when you would be leaving. So things to think about, you know, your own personal documents, you know, if you can have a key, your medications, if you can have money, you know, sometimes that would be the most ideal situation. And that doesn't always work out. You know, sometimes it just happens that in the moment, somebody sees a window of opportunity and they leave, um, which is also, you know, a healthy choice for them. But if we can plan and have the most things set up, the safer the situation will be.
Thank you for sharing all of that. I feel each element makes so much sense, and like it says in its title, it's that safety. It's knowing that there's a plan, and that you can execute that, or you have, you know, let's say if you have to like get out instantly, you still have an idea of what you need to grab or what can you grab in that moment and to go. So I really appreciate you sharing pieces of that safety plan because it's so important.
Yeah, no problem.
Um, so I did also want to ask you, so let's say now um, the person has left, they have followed their safety plan, um, and they have, it's like that part where they're gone from that situation, they have their restraining order on that person, um, or if they don't, that's not true. What next? That I
Yeah.
think that's a huge question with this. Like, what happens next?
Yeah, that's a big question. I also was just going to put in there too. Um, and this can be after too, but there is a significant number of, you know, hotlines and resources too people can reach out to prior to getting out, but also after to help navigate. So I feel like it works to go in this place, but um, one of like the national numbers is 1-800-799-SAFE, which is also 7233. That's like a national line. And then they also have a text line where you can text home to 741-741. Um, a lot of these different hotlines have resources in everybody's specific area. You know, so getting out might not mean you have your own place set up now that you've decided to leave. Um, so they have safe houses and they have counseling resources, group counseling, individual counseling. So they are a really great resource, because basically in every town, in every kind of small location, there are access centers for people to utilize. And those are a great step, to explain your situation and get the appropriate resources that are available to you. So that would be one thing. But to also answer your question specifically, so a lot of times after being in a domestic violence situation, we see in the counseling side of things really high rates of PTSD, and a lot of impact from the trauma. So each person's path is definitely going to look a little different. Just like each person you had on here to talk, um, through this series, we all have a little different perspective or something that we do differently. So, my biggest thing would be, as being a counselor, that someone should definitely seek out minimally, individual therapy with a counselor. And if that's at a bigger clinic or a private clinician, either way, having someone to talk to that is outside of your situation, not your family, not anybody that has, just this one idea of that partner you left or that family member. Um, so I think individual counseling is huge. Also, group counseling can be really helpful. Most of the work that happens is actually after you leave the situation. Most times in therapy during a domestic violent relationship, really as a counselor, we just try to make sure that that person stays safe. Um, but there's not a lot that you can work into for the trauma just yet, because we're just trying to get the person day by day through. And now, after leaving the situation, we have all this flood of emotion and symptoms, and we're trying to figure ourselves out, you know? So I think counseling is a big portion. Getting, new hobbies started, making your own new routine is really important. Having supports is really the biggest thing. That's how we get through a lot of emotions and a lot of different diagnosis for mental health is coming together, you know. If that's coming together with one person or a group of people, either way, we need a big support network to help us get through, building our new future.
Thank you for sharing that as well. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I know, like you said, where, in that midst of like that safety plan and getting out and everything, in that moment, you really are, I feel like your brain kind of puts the emotions, like the emotions are there, but almost like aside. And you're just like, okay, get this done, get this and get this done. And I agree, like after you're out, you're like, oh my goodness, everything floods in. And I say this from a survivor's perspective, that everything does start to flood in. And sometimes you could be watching a show or a movie, uh, even later on, after having this happen and have that like PTSD experience. So I definitely back you in saying that counseling or that support system is so important, even if it can't be your family and it's friends that you maybe met along the way, in the quote unquote recovery healing process. Um, so I appreciate you sharing that, because that's so, again, all of this is so important, right?
Yeah. Um, It all is very important, and that's why, like you said, there's so much that comes along with domestic violence, that's why we can have a whole month of awareness, because there's a lot. One thing too I could add on to, when looking for a therapist, it doesn't have to be this, but there's some different interventions that can be utilized after a traumatic event. And it's, I wouldn't say every single person for sure has PTSD. I mean, it depends on the level, but more than likely, people coming out of those situations have some sort of trauma or trauma response. And, like you mentioned, trauma can, have a symptom very unexpectedly, right? We're watching a show, we see a person, somebody raises their voice, loud noises, all of those things can be triggering, and really bring you back to the event, even though you're out of it. Because that's kind of how the brain stores trauma. But if you were looking for a therapist, you could look to see that they offer cognitive behavioral therapy, or also known as CBT. Um, CBT helps people attain, safety while helping reduce symptoms and if there's substance misuse. And that could be in a group or an individual setting. So CBT is really helpful. Interpersonal psychotherapy could also be something as a treatment intervention that would be helpful for you. It helps you reflect on interpersonal difficulties, such as like emotional withdrawal from relationships and individuals that, typically would happen as a result of domestic violence. There's also cognitive processing therapy, or CPT, that helps with reducing, symptoms of PTSD, but also depression. Because, we can also have a lot of depression symptoms after getting out of that situation. A lot of people would think it's, relief that you're out of a situation. But in reality, when everything kind of settles, we can feel really alone and really sad. And then there's also like EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization or reprocessing. That's a known treatment for individuals with PTSD. So there is, a lot of hope for after, and it doesn't always seem that way at the beginning, but there is a lot of treatment that can be offered. There's a lot of resources in regards to safe housing, counseling, grants, and things that can help people get back up on their feet again.
Thank you for sharing that as well, because that is, it's, I don't feel like it's well known how many or much resources are available out there. And I know you're only naming a few out of the many, but we'd be here all day going through all of it. But I'm so grateful to you for giving us these resources and sharing them, because it's just I feel a lot of people are like, well, there's no one that can help me, or sometimes they relate their own situation to how it happened for someone else. But I think it's important to know that it's not always going to be this. It could, the same outcome. Like for example, with myself, I had a hard time getting a restraining order, but at the time I was not aware of the resources that were actually out there. I thought that I was isolated. I thought that I had no help at all. And then as I started this podcast and getting, I guess, like meeting everyone and learning, I've learned years later all the resources that were actually available the whole time. I feel like, so thank you for bringing that in.
Yeah, I mean, I think, being able to come onto your podcast is amazing because, together as you as a survivor and me as a clinician, working with individuals like yourself, we can collaborate together and show, a lot of hope that people can have, not only from your perspective, but also, the statistics and the fact side of information, which I think people really like both, and that brings a lot of hope that, you can get out of your situation and there's people that have done it. And there's people out there, even including myself, that is able to help you through that process.
Absolutely. And I absolutely appreciate you coming on here today with me. Very honored for this second episode.
Yes, and I appreciate being able to come back on. It's always a pleasure to be on here and be able to be helpful whenever I can.
Yes. Well, we know that we'll see you again. Before we go, I would love if you share how you can be found.
Yeah, so I'm not on a lot of platforms as others are, but I do have a page called Grounding and Growing with Kira on Facebook. And actually, just the other day, I posted some statistics and the domestic violence cycle. I posted that on my page. So I try to post some resources on there and some information and, just be able to help other people, but also bring in other clinicians and things on that page to be a resource.
That's perfect and beautiful. I'm so happy that you created that.
Yeah,
Well,
so that is primarily my page right now as I work and look to expand some more.
perfect. Well, with that, thank you so much again for joining me, and we will see you soon. I know it.
Thanks so much, Brie, for having me on.
Absolutely. Um, Thank you. And so, for everyone listening, with that, you are loved, you are worthy, you are cherished, and we are proud of you. Until next time, on the Blue Pod.